Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. With the government plunged into deep political crisis over Brexit, the issue continues to dominate the headlines. But as preparations begin for the possibility of a no deal, Britain remains divided. However, amid the fallout following the EU referendum in 2016, a new political party was formed. A party which promised to give voters hope, the Renew Party. And today we are joined by Renew Party leader Annabel Mullin and Vincent Dietrich, who started Renew's first university society at the University of Birmingham. Firstly, thank you both for joining us today. Annabel, in this huge period of uncertainty, looking ahead in the long term, are you confident that Renew can really topple or put a significant dent into the dominance of the main political parties in Westminster?
Thank you so much for having us here. It's great to be here. Yeah, we feel very strongly that if you look at someone like a small party like UKIP, for example, who had no national representative that was ever elected in an election, and yet they managed to change the entire direction of our country based purely on the power of their votes. And that's exactly what we can replicate in the short term, and in the longer term, of course, we have other intentions.
And a key mission of Renew is to advocate remaining part of the European Union. But do you acknowledge many of the concerns that voters have with how things operate in Brussels?
Yeah, hugely. We actually spent quite a large part of this year going around the country and talking to people all across it, and we've had thousands and thousands of responses, trying to actually delve into what the issues were that led people to vote in the way they did, either side, and discovered that a lot of what it was not really about Europe per se, but about resources that weren't put in their regions, in their areas, things that they needed, that they felt were being stripped away. And those aren't answered by us coming out of Europe, they're answered by local government change, national government change, and priorities in the way we do things. And I think that's the thing that starts to underpin everything that we're trying to do.
And Vincent, what are some of the main frustrations that you're hearing from younger people in relation to Brexit?
So a lot of people feel politically homeless. They feel like neither of the big parties are really focusing on what's going on. And then also a lot of people who've joined are from minority groups and don't like the kind of very male, kind of white British kind of leaders that the parties have. So I think with Renew, a lot of people just wanted a restart to kind of drain the swamp and bring in new people. Yeah. And also the fact that we've got people who are from very privileged backgrounds running the NHS, even though they themselves have got private healthcare. We've got teachers, people who lead the education and who've never been a teacher, who've never really been in a classroom for the last 10 years. So I think people from our groups, they really want to see more people from areas they know, from professions they know. They don't want to be led by someone who they can't relate to.
And Annabel, with fears over the possibility of a no deal intensifying day by day, what is Renew's official stance on the People's Vote campaign? Would you like to see another referendum?
I mean, I don't actually ever want to see another referendum again in my entire life, because I don't think that type of politics is the right way for our country. I think we're a mediated democracy, and I really like that. However, having said all of that, that's my own personal view, we as a party fully support the idea of a people's vote, because it gives people the chance to say, having looked at the terms of this deal, you know, you buy your house, you go along and you go, yes, I really like this, the contract comes up, turns out there are some things in that contract that you're not completely sure about, but you know what, it's okay to then have a new idea and a new vote. And so we fully support the people's vote, because we think that it gives people the chance to say, having looked at what the options are, we now think this is, yes, a good idea, a bad idea, and actually to say what they think about the withdrawal agreement. All of the implications are that we're going to be, have less.
Yeah. And with local authorities across the country facing budget cuts like never before in these times of austerity, do you fear that times and our economy as a whole could actually decrease significantly if Brexit does go ahead?
I mean, they talk about the GDP, and it can be anything from 6 to 7%, depending on which type of, Brexit we have. it is going to have huge implications across the country for the amount of money that we've got to spend on the things that really matter. And having actually spoken to everyone about what they think really matters, it's that security of feeling that you've got enough police in the streets, you've got enough nurses in the wards, you've got enough teachers in the classrooms, and that sort of sense that you've actually got the presence that matters. That really concerns us, and we want to make sure that that works.
And Vincent, do you believe that we as a nation can actually get past all of this division that the issue of Brexit has caused?
So I came from Germany in 2004. My family were recruited by the NHS in a kind of very positive time. We were called over, like people who were for the NHS from around the world, to help the nation, and we were welcomed. Now we live in a time where I, as a German, get quite rudely greeted by a lot of people.
Okay.
There's a lot more kind of racism. There's a lot more anti-foreign sentiment. And I think if you look at how it was a few years ago and look at it now, I think the rhetoric around Brexit has allowed these people to come out and say these things. And I think if there's a time before Brexit, which was good, then there can be a time after Brexit. I think we need to do a lot of healing. But I think, as you said, the reason that people have kind of reverted to this scapegoating, blaming the foreigners, is because there's problems at the kind of at the bottom of British politics, which aren't the foreigners, but they're a lot easier to blame than actually fixing the problems.
And Annabel, as someone who's worked in the NHS and in the police as well, what are the potential consequences of a Brexit in terms of, are we going to be seeing less people on the streets protecting society, and are we going to see less NHS staff as well supporting our most vulnerable?
Very much so. I mean, you can see already the implications for the NHS have been absolutely enormous. People feeling like this hostile environment which Theresa May has created when her time in the Home Office and now as Prime Minister, that is only going to get worse. There is a real tangible sense that people don't want to come here and invest time and energy in a country that doesn't want them. And that's just simply not the case. You know, you talk to people on the streets and actually people do want people to come. It's not about that. It's just, it's a different, you know, it's the resources. They want to feel that they are resourced properly in their local communities. And that's a local government, national government priority. But yeah, I think with the policing as well, you know, I've watched as my criminal justice, I also sit as a magistrate now, and I watch as it's been stripped away and it's been stripped bare, and beat officers just don't really exist in the same way as they used to. And you know, beat officers and that local intelligence, you know, they know about who's in the gangs because they know the kids on the estate. That kind of intelligence, that just doesn't exist at the moment because it's just not the priorities. And part of the problem with a no deal, and we saw it, they're going to ask for 3,500 reserve army officers to be called up. And that's all well and good, but you know, we haven't got enough people on the borders if things go wrong there. I had a meeting this morning about emergency planning and the implications of bringing in, you know, transporting live animal and the stock and what that's going to do. And because we just don't have the resources there, you are probably going to see that the police have to fulfill other roles, and then that leads to other problems. I mean, so it's just, you know, the whole thing is just enormous.
And Vincent, with this infighting that we are seeing day by day within Labour, within the Conservatives, do you understand just why people are really quite sick and tired of British politics as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a Labour Party member.
Okay.
And I'd go to the weekly meetings, and it was a bit like an episode of EastEnders or one of these programmes, because the whole meeting was just people arguing within their group. Being split on almost every issue. You had the kind of, because I think the problem with with the Labour Party and the Tory Party is you've got a huge spectrum of people. You've got the kind of quite moderate centrists who have very similar views to us, but then you might want to vote for them, but then you end up with a leader like Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May who don't support the views of the MP that you're voting for. So I think when I went to the local meetings, I would go knowing a few people whose views I agree with, but then would be quite horribly approached by people from my party who said quite rude things to me just because I had more centrist views to them, which means that you almost become exiled out of your own party and again politically homeless.
And how can we as a nation, again, appeal to those voters who we have lost from the political process, especially the younger generation? And are you hopeful that we can do that?
Yeah, I think it's because they feel that there's no ownership of anything, because it's been these two parties, fighting against each other, and it becomes increasingly argumentative, and it's not actually helpful or conducive in the longer term for anything that's sensible to come out of that kind of, always combative. Actually, if you give people the chance to be part of the process, and it's very bloated, and we're really about quite radical reform of the whole political system, because we see that people need to be able to partake without fearing that they're going to be, abusive, that it isn't actually going to be like that. And it doesn't have to be so tribal. With locally, when we ran in May this year, we had people who just were so excited about that they could vote for something, not, to stop something else, which is what a lot of people felt like they were voting for last year and with a few years. And we're keen to get lots of people involved. So Digital Democracy is a platform where we're building at the moment for all our members, so you can be really involved in all the policy and how it goes forward. And getting out on social media and making sure, and obviously our union societies, they're brilliant.
And as well as restoring democracy, another focus for Renew is that of compassion, which includes welfare. Have you been quite alarmed by the rollout of universal credit and the issues that it is causing across our nation?
Yeah, hugely. I think anyone who's worked with those who are most vulnerable, and I've done it in various roles in the public sector, to watch asking people who live on a weekly basis to then do something on a monthly basis requires people to have new skills and new training, and it's a very different way of living. I think we all had sympathies with trying to make a simpler system that would actually work out, but then you take 2 billion away from it, and of course it's going to hit them. It's just frankly obvious, and the way it's continuing to be rolled out it's just not the right approach. And so pause. Let's think better about how we can do this, because we are capable of so much. We are so powerful as a community, and I mean that in the broadest sense. And actually pulling in all our knowledge, and I love it with Renew, because we send out an email and go, look, we're interested in talking about this kind of policy, and then we get people with who've experienced things, lived experience, who have academic experience, who business experience, and you draw those together, and actually that's how you come to some really impressive ideas and conclusions and new thoughts.
And just staying on that topic of universal credit, do you truly believe there will be a rethink from the Conservatives on that, or do you think it is really here to stay, the system as it currently is?
Well, I mean, I think if Brexit hadn't basically taken over absolutely everything, I think that they would probably be stopping it now, because the Labour Party would be absolutely nailing them on it, because unfortunately we have an ineffective opposition. They're not being nailed on something that is actually criminally hurting people. I mean, I see it in court all the time, where people come and they can't afford to do X, Y, and Z, and therefore they're stealing. So the implications are, a lot of it is common sense. We kick people out of prison, and 10% who go out of prison that night are homeless. Okay. How do you expect somebody who is homeless, who's just come out of prison, to be able to be reformed? That isn't possible unless they've got support, because they're going to go and steal to feed themselves because they've got no money and they're homeless. I mean, it's all of that, how we think about it, and we can do this better.
And Vincent, the Brexit, obviously the biggest issue for generations, but do you believe it's somewhat overcrowded, the news agenda, the political agenda? We've seen issues such as, I guess, universal credit or homelessness not achieve the recognition and promotion as much as I guess they need.
Yeah, definitely. Though I think a big problem about talking about Brexit the whole time means that the actual roots, the actual causes, the reasons the UK is actually, people actually voted Brexit, the reason why people are worse off aren't looked at. So, for example, the Tories have managed to carry on a large percentage of their cuts, so they're going a bit less now, because everyone's talking about Brexit. Basically, it's given them kind of a waiver to carry on as usual, blame everything on Brexit, blame everything on the EU, which is the thing that they're working on anyway. So if you blame everything on the EU, you say you're working on getting out of the EU, you've basically got a get out of jail free card. And with Jeremy Corbyn not really holding the government accountable on basically anything, it's kind of, given them this kind of free thing to be able to do what they want. And I think especially the news coverage, everything's always Brexit, 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 and means that we as the people don't really have the time to hold the government to account. And I mean, I study politics, and I know a lot about I spend a lot of my day doing politics, but even then it's crowded with Brexit. So I think even for me it's difficult to understand everything that the government's doing at the moment, because everything's full with this one topic, which covers up the things that we should be looking at, which is another thing that I think our party is quite good at. Not only do we say that it's covering other problems, we're also not a one purpose party. We've actually got solutions for the other things as well.
And Annabel, with the EU refusing to budge on the deal which has been negotiated, do you believe there is any chance, one, that deal will come before the House of Commons in January, and if it does, will it be able to pass?
My feeling is at the moment that the withdrawal agreement will come on the 14th of January and it will not get support that it needs to pass. And for good reason, because it is not, it is the best of a bad job. And there is, I have moments of feeling a little bit of sympathy for Theresa May, and then I remember her time in the Home Office and the hostile environment, and that evaporates pretty rapidly. But you do feel that she has taken on the mantle of trying to create, make the impossible possible, because the promises that were made during the referendum were completely outrageous. And they were never going to be possible. There was a great woman on a show recently, and she was talking to a Brexiteer, and he was saying, oh yes, we should be, we put all this stuff into, building our satellite systems, and therefore, and she was like, but you chose to leave. And why did you think you were going to be able to keep it? And it was like, and he sort of sat there going, okay. And that's exactly the point. We did actually choose to leave. What did we expect them to then turn around and do? And to be fair, the deal that they have given us is, it's not great, but we knew nothing was ever going to be as good as remaining, in terms of economics, certainly.
And we touched on some of the rhetoric which was going around in that EU referendum campaign a little bit before. Do you believe the issue of immigration was somewhat used negatively, and people sort of took advantage of that, and, with the false information which was going around, that may have led them to potentially vote leave?
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking about it to somebody the other day, and I spent a lot of time campaigning over the last few years, and one of our big things is we want to reject those lies around the immigration. If anyone remembers that poster that Nigel Farage produced, and I had conversations with people when I was campaigning last year who said, I voted leave because of that poster. That poster made me think I was going to be able to stop these types of people. And then I discovered it wasn't stopping those types of people, it was stopping these types of people, and I don't like those people, but I like those. And it was like, none of this is right. All of this is mired in this kind of, slightly racist rhetoric potentially. It's also, immigration is very positive for our country. And I mean, you can see that whether it's about the emotion and being, having families who move here, or whether it's about, my good friends, my next door neighbour who's Polish, or my good friends who are Spanish, whatever it is, it's a really positive part of our country. And as an island nation, my surname's from Ireland, we've always been about immigration, and it's strange to see that that has underpinned it and been abused actually by people.
Obviously, it brings huge economic benefits, immigration. But do you believe our policies do need to be reformed slightly, or are you quite happy with them as they currently are?
I think this morning, obviously, we've seen the new white papers come out with immigration, and they looked at basically capping it at £30,000. Okay. Now, that would basically mean you wouldn't have police officers, nurses, this great video which does the A to Z of people, and it's a huge number of people, funnily enough, earn less than that. And so whilst I think it's about not completely open borders and considered, it's actually not that people don't want people to come. They want to know that when they walk into their GP surgery, when they walk into their A&E department, when they go to school, that the class sizes are the right size, that they feel like, there's a teacher and 20 kids, not a teacher and 40 kids. It's actually about that sort of really tangible thing. There's enough books in the school, and how do we make that happen? What does that look like? That regional transport works, and the links between different regional transport, that works because it's been invested in. I was talking to somebody in Blackpool the other day. He couldn't get to an appointment for a job because he couldn't afford the bus fare because it was too expensive. That's a missed opportunity for us. We should be making sure that people can do that kind of thing. So I don't actually think a lot of the immigration, the rhetoric around it is accurate. I think it's about how we've then not invested in areas. And we were talking about HS2 earlier and the issues around that as well.
But even beyond that, every summer I work in Germany with refugees. And I think you look at them, you look at the refugees that have come over, not only were they fleeing war, but also a huge number of them were leading doctors in their region, surgeons, physicists, chemists, and yes, Germany now has to pay for a house for them, a school for them, but investing loads of money to make sure the class sizes are small is huge, because a lot of them have learnt German, and within the next 5 years are expected to contribute to the economy. And I think if you don't just look in the next 3 years, next 4 years, but the next 10 years, it's a great investment. And these people, I mean, the people that come here, the people that come to Germany are usually some of the brightest people. So you look at these images of all these refugees coming over, when you actually talk to them, the majority of them who have the money to come over have been some of the most highly skilled people who are then able to contribute to our economy. Also they're in need, but I think it's also the fact that we look at not only the next 3 years, next 4 years, but what they can contribute in the next 10 years.
Yeah. And Annabel, do you blame politicians here for continuing to stoke up divisions as well between us, or do you not believe they are truly to blame?
I think politics is to blame for quite a lot, actually, because I think what it has done is it's not really got to the root of the problems. It's found easy answers to really complex things. I mean, most of the stuff we're trying to deal with is not that simple. So actually, even the referendum in itself, you know, a yes/no answer to one of the most complex decisions that we could ever have made. But it was answering the shout for, I need more security in my local area for X. I need to feel on the streets that I'm being looked after by police officers. You know, I mean, one of our big things is investing in education, because we feel that giving people a sure start across the country is really important. So we'd like to put 30% at least more into our education system at the younger years, because if you get kids, you know, and there's lots of research to show between 5, 6 and 7, and you start them thinking it might be a spaceman, or, you know, aspirational ideas, that affects long-term outcomes, and that's really important.
Of course. And we've widely touched on the prospect of a second referendum, but Vincent, do we want to see an early general election, or does Renew, want to see an early general election?
Does Renew want to see an early? It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's one, I think, a question that's been talked about a lot. I think I don't want to see this government destroy our country for a single day longer. I don't want Jeremy Corbyn to lead the very weak opposition. I think both of those positions could be taken by far more able people. I think on the way here we were saying it feels like they made a bet who could be the worst leader, and I feel like they're both doing incredibly well. And I think in that way, yes, I do want to see an election as soon as possible. We've currently got 120 people ready to stand. And yes, okay, I think if we have another few months, we might have more people ready to stand across the country. But I think every day that Theresa May is given the ropes of this country, is a day where this country goes down the wrong route. It's a day where Europe gets more annoyed at us. It's a day where the country gets split more. And every day Jeremy Corbyn tries to stop that is a day wasted, because, let's be honest, he's been sitting duck. He's done very little. I
mean, you don't form a party with the idea of not going into an election. We're ready to run. We want to, you know, take our country back in a way. It's, you know, it's meant to be this open country. It's meant to be about fair play, and that seems to have disappeared in the current environment, and that's what we want to win back. And if it's a general election, if it's a by-election, we want to take our part, because that allows people to vote, and that's what democracy should be about.
Give people a voice again, I guess.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, what can you give to voters that no other political party can?
I think we are very based around new people bringing their talent and their experience, whether it's work or lived experience, to play, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that sort of sense of really bringing in new and ideas and people is really important to us. And, you know, that kind of sense of rejecting the lies of politics, radically reforming politics and rebooting Britain. That's where we are. And it's new hope. That's what we want to be.
Vincent, so Renew is definitely here to stay.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's everything for today. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And thank you all for watching. Make sure to tune in next week for The Politics Show. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.